Hi guys, welcome back to my channel. Today I have got quite a challenge on my hands. We're starting from a slightly different angle than normal because I need you to be able to see all of my Atwood books. So, as you'll have seen from the title of the video, I'm going to tier rank the Margaret Atwood fiction novels. And I'm quite scared. I have done no prep for this video at all. I'm literally going to do the intro to the video, pause filming, rank them, and then come back. And I'm genuinely a little bit like, not sure how I'm going to do this. So for those of you that don't know, about 18 months ago I set myself the challenge of reading all of Margaret Atwood's fiction novels in publication order. I ran What the Book Club read and I had a little group of people that were reading along with me, which was so nice, and that project finished in May. So now is the time for me to work out what my ranking is of the Atwood novels. So I'll be back in a second. Wish me luck. Okay, that took ages. I know it's been a split second for you guys, but I've literally been sat here for about half an hour, putting them in order, fiddling around with the order, and now I have this gaping space on my shelf. They're all down here. Okay, so I'm going to start with my least favourite and work upwards so that we end on a positive note. Although, if you've been on my channel for more than 10 seconds, you could probably guess my favourite book, but you might not know the order in between. So my least favourite book, and the only book that I was like apologetic that I made other people read, was Surfacing. So this is one of the shorter Atwoods, and it's about a woman whose father has gone missing, so she goes out to his remote cabin with a couple of friends to look for him, which sounds really interesting. I was bored rigid by this book. It's the only Atwood I don't want to reread ever again. I remember having to study it for my degree at some point and being bored then, but going into it I was like, well, that was, you know, well over a decade ago. My reading tastes have changed. I've become more of a literary fiction reader. Maybe I just didn't quite get it first time around. I was really bored. It's the only Atwood I would genuinely not recommend. So that was definitely the bottom of my pile. Next up is Bodily Harm. This one, is this the one where she... Yes, okay, so we've got a woman called Rennie who is a journalist, and she basically decides to run away from her life, and she goes abroad to a tiny Caribbean island and meets a guy called Paul, and it goes from there. And this one again, I was just a little bit bored. It's very literary fiction. It's very like feminist literary fiction, but like feminism from the 70s. When was this published? Oh, this is 1981. Yeah, it's an odd one. I'm glad I've read it or reread it. Most of these were rereads for me, but that is definitely in the next slot. I'm going to go fairly quickly through these because there are 17 of them. Then I have Life Before Man. This is about a couple. So this is about a husband and wife and the husband's girlfriend, and it's all about their weird dynamic, and it's kind of like horrible people doing horrible things to each other. It's one of my least favourite things to read about, but it is a really interesting look at relationships and dynamics between people, and the things that people can do to hurt each other. It's quite dark and quite tense, and I did enjoy it, but it's definitely not one of my favourite Atwoods. After that is, let's see if I can say this, the Peneloplad, that title, which is Margaret Atwood's rewriting of the Odyssey from the perspective of Penelope, who was Odysseus's wife. I did enjoy this. I think it was because it was so short, like it didn't feel like it had enough time to develop. It's definitely interesting, and if you're interested in Greek retellings, I would recommend this one. I just didn't love it, although I do love this cover. It's absolutely glorious. And yeah, it was interesting. Glad I read it. Not loads to say. Then I've got Lady Oracle. Sorry, a stack of books has just fallen over. Lady Oracle is... Which one is this? Oh yeah, okay. From fat girl to thin, from red hair to mud brown, from London to Toronto, from Polish count to radical husband, Joan Foster isn't utterly confused by her life of multiple identities. She decides to escape to an Italian hill town to take stock of her life, but first she must organise her death. So this starts with the main character faking her death and basically running away to an Italian town, and then her looking back over her life and telling her life story. I did find it interesting because she goes through so many different like guises, as it says on the back. It sort of reminded me, although this came first, of The Seven Husbands of Evelyn Hugo. It's kind of got that slight vibe. There's a lot going on. There's lots of characters in and out, and it's got a really strong sense of place and time. So yeah, enjoyed that one. We're now into the books that I did enjoy, and I really struggled to like differentiate between them. Next up is the third in the MadAddam trilogy, and that is MadAddam. This is Atwood's sci-fi trilogy, which I'll talk about more as I get to the other books. This was the third one. I just didn't love how she finished the trilogy. In my experience and in my opinion, Atwood is not great at endings. And this one just wasn't my favourite of the series. It's still really interesting and really cool. And like I said, I'll talk more about it as I get to the other books. So there's that one. Then there was a book that was a new read for me. There was only, I think, 2 or 3. Yeah, 3. In this project, and that was The Heart Goes Last. I nearly said by Margaret Atwood then. We know this about Margaret Atwood. This whole video is about Margaret Atwood. So this is set in a dystopian future, well, in a dystopian society. It's not necessarily in the future, where everything in society has crumbled, and there is this project that promises job security and happiness and a kind of like Stepford Wives type existence. The only catch is you have to spend every other month in prison. And the months when you're not in prison, your alternates will live in your house and live your life and do your job. And this couple sign up for this programme, and it's about what happens. I thought this was really clever. It had a really good twist that really shocked me. And it feels very kind of typical, dark, comedic Atwood, which I've very much enjoyed. Then we're going for the biggest of the Atwood novels, and that is this Biffa, The Blind Assassin. This is a book within a book within a book. It won the 2000 Booker Prize. She's big. And it starts with 10 days after the war ended, my sister Laura drove a car off a bridge. So it's basically a family history. It's about sisters. It's about husbands and wives. It's about the relationships between people. It's about the lies that we tell and the things that we do, and I really love it. I also really love these editions because they're so beautiful, and it makes me sad that not all of the books are in these editions, but hey. Next up we have the other one that I hadn't read before, and another retelling. This is Hagseed. This is a retelling of The Tempest, and I thought it was really clever. It's also got beautiful red sprayed edges. I thought this was really clever. I'm not a big fan of The Tempest by William Shakespeare. I think it's a weird play. I struggle to connect with it. It's just not one of my favourites. However, I really liked how this was done because we are following a disgraced director from a theatre who is basically fired from his job one day, and he takes himself off and lives as a hermit for several years, and then re-emerges and decides to put on his version of The Tempest in a prison. He gets a job in a prison working with prisoners, and it's about his revenge. It's about family. The Tempest is present as a complete play in the book because he's putting it on, but it's also got a lot of the same themes as the play, such as revenge, and I just thought it was a really interesting way of doing it. Then I have Cat's Eyes, which shortlisted for the Booker Prize that year. Which year was this? And this one is about female friendship and relationships and how that can go wrong. This was in 1990. So it says on the back, if I were to meet Cordelia again, what would I tell her about myself? The truth or whatever would make me look good? Probably the latter. I still have that need. And this is about a painter who returns to Toronto. Atwood does a lot of like people returning to hometowns. This is about an artist who returns to Toronto for an exhibition, and going back brings up all these memories of Cordelia, who was a childhood friend but also a childhood bully and tormentor, and it looks at, again, the things people do to each other, and I really enjoyed it. It's very kind of haunting is how I would describe this book, and again it's in that beautiful edition. Love them. Next we have Oryx and Crake. This is the start of the MadAddam trilogy. So I've already talked about the last book. This is the first book. This is, as I've already said, is her sci-fi trilogy. It's set in a world where there's been some sort of massive event, and most of humankind has been wiped out. And this starts with a guy called Snowman who is on a beach alone, and then a group of people come towards him. And it's about how he got to this point, what happens. It goes back in time, and then everything kind of comes together, leads up together. I think this is so fantastically clever. As always with Atwood, everything that she puts in here has already happened somewhere in the world, and it could happen, and that's what makes it so scary. And I just think it's a fantastic trilogy and a really good start, and that's why it's so high up on my ranking. We have got 6 books left. Next is one of the earlier Atwoods, and this is The Edible Woman. Is this the first one? I think this is the first Atwood. I think this was her debut. I want to say it was. Yes, 1979. So this is her fiction debut. And this is about, Well, this is about Marion, who is determinedly ordinary, waiting to get married. She likes her work, her broody flatmate, and her sober fiancé Peter. All goes well at first, but Marion has reckoned without an inner self that wants something more, that calmly sabotages her careful plans, her stable routine, and her digestion. Marriage a la mode, Marion discovers, is something she literally can't stomach. I'm not going to say too much because I don't want to spoil this one. Oh, that cover's bent, that makes me sad. But this is very feminist, it's very literary fiction, it's pretty weird, it goes to some places. I had a brilliant time, and I just thought for a debut novel it's fantastic, so I would definitely recommend that one. Then I have a book that is controversial for many reasons, and I understand the controversies behind it, and that book is The Testaments. Now, this is very high up in my ranking because I really enjoy this book. I've read it twice, flew through it both times, and I just loved it. However, it co-won the Booker Prize in 2019, and it shouldn't have done. Atwood said that at the time, that shouldn't have happened, and I agree. This is not Booker Prize material. I think it was given because it was Margaret Atwood, because it was extending the Handmaid's Tale universe after so long. And yeah, it's not her best writing, and I've seen people say that they think it ruins the Handmaid's Tale. I disagree. I think this extends the world really nicely. I loved getting more of a certain character. I could have done without the kind of YA elements. I could have just been happy in that older character. I'm trying not to give spoilers. In that kind of older character point of view, I don't think we needed the YA bits to it, but I still really enjoyed it. I've flown through it twice, and I gave it 5 stars both times, so it had to be pretty high up in this ranking. Then we're going back in Atwood time, and we are going to go for The Robber Bride. I love this book, it's so clever. So we've got 3 friends who, and at the start of the novel, they are at the funeral for their friend Xenia, I think, and they all have different memories of Xenia. She did different things to each of them, and it's about, again, how their lives connect, how they overlap, things people do to each other. That's a really big theme in Atwood's writing, and I just thought it was fab. It is one of the bigger ones, but I've read this a few times now and I always fly straight through it. I think if you're looking for a starting point, this wouldn't be a bad place to start. And yeah, it's just really fun, and I love the so-called villain of the piece. Then I have my favourite of the MadAddam trilogy, which is the second one, which is The Year of the Flood. I can't say much about this because it's the second book, but it builds on the first one. We have a perspective shift, and I just think it's really clever. Atwood does this thing where we're following a different character from the first book, but the characters from the first book are also present in this one, but seen from a different direction. It's got a lot to say. It's got a lot to say about social commentary. It's got a lot to say about things like global warming, and what we're doing to the planet, and what we're doing again to each other. And I love these editions, but these are cool as well. And I mean, look at the spine. So yes, I have cracked all of these spines. I'm sorry, I know. We've now got 2 left. I think you can probably guess what my favourite book is going to be, but can you guess what my second favourite book is going to be? So my second favourite Atwood of her fiction novels is Alias Grace. I think this is a fantastic book. This is historical fiction following Grace Marks, who was the last woman to be condemned to death in Canada. We meet her in her prison cell, and then we jump back in time to see how she got there. That's all I'm going to say. Netflix also did a really good adaptation of this, which I would really recommend. It's very faithful. And this is just a really fascinating look at women. What happens if you're a woman that doesn't fit into society and the kind of criminal justice system of the time? So that is my second favourite Atwood. And then, have you guessed yet? You probably have. My favourite Atwood is still The Handmaid's Tale. Although I have to say, I really hate this cover. I really hate this edition. I think it's really ugly. But it's the paperback edition I have that is on this shelf, so there we go. This is my favourite Atwood novel. I'm sure everyone and their dog knows what this book is about, but it's set in a dystopian or speculative fiction world in which women have been stripped of all their rights and split into functions. We follow a so-called handmaid who is forced to breed. And this was one of those books. I've got a whole video on this book, although it was when I was like a baby booktuber. I'll link in the description anyway, because it might be funny. I've got a whole review for this book. I mention it all the time. It's one of my favourite novels of all time. And it was always going to be my favourite on this list. So that is my ranking of the Atwood novels. I've now got to try and take a thumbnail for this video. so that'll be interesting. Drop me a comment below, let me know, have you read any Atwoods? If you have, what's your favourite? If you haven't read an Atwood, where do you think you might start? Yeah, let's have a chat about Atwood in the comments, because I am an Atwood stan. And I think that's it for this video. So please subscribe if you would like more of this chaos, and I will see you in the next one. Thanks guys, bye.